Sunday morning, it's cold at the end of May. This is distinctly different from where we were living, where I would have the air conditioners running. I like it here. I thought I'd start by showing a masterpiece. Masterpiece by my grandson. This is a portrait of my wife. You can tell, he said, because there's her leg, 2 black lines. That's her leg. So, wonderful masterpiece to go on the refrigerator. We were surmising that when other grandchildren come, whether there's a ranking system, whose picture goes above whose on the refrigerator. So, we've been talking about flyby of idea, worldviews, different ways of people thinking to help us understand. Ideas do matter. For example, I was watching public TV this week, and they had a thing on the heavy artillery unit from Brandon, Vermont, in the Civil War. And saying how they were the only group to go out when all the others wouldn't go out into the field, and they were just mowed down. Like, wow. But the guy said something interesting toward the end of the show. He was talking about why they did this, why they sacrificed themselves in this way. And they said, because of an idea. Now, when I have 2 huskies, and most of the time they're laying on the floor because they have a hard life in my house, and they're very tired all the time. And so if I call them, they barely open an eye. However, if I go into the kitchen and I get the cookie pack, and I just very carefully and quietly peel it open, all of a sudden there's 2 ding, sitting there looking at me. So that's what I was when the guy said it was about an idea. I went, what? And he was saying how some say, and I know this could be controversial, some say that one view of the Civil War was that both sides were equally valid and they just had a difference of opinion. But he was saying, no, it was an idea that this Vermont unit was fighting for, that it was an idea of the quality of humans, that all humans were made in the image of God, all had value, and that it was worth dying for to bring freedom to those who do not be treated that way. Ideas. So that's what we're talking about, ideas. And I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm going to do something I haven't done. I'm taking my mask off. Why? Because the veterinarian fully vaccinated me, and so technically I don't have to wear a mask unless I'm in Walmart, which Pride Shopper requires masks. But so I'm going to start breathing. Okay, so we were talking about things like atheism, agnosticism, other things, different ideas, and trying to get an idea how we would talk to somebody with these ideas. This morning we're picking up with modernism. And then, of course, we'll go to postmodernism. But we will not cover pre-modernism. But modernism, a way of thinking, probably not so much heard of because of the reign of postmodernism and how that's bandied about in the church. But modernism started, I say, the Enlightenment. Started around the Enlightenment. Mark here, who wrote this book I'm loosely basing on, says that in the 19th century, Pope Pius X called it modernism, this idea, and he declared it to be heretical. And he required that all the clergy in the Catholic Church take an anti-modernistic oath. Well, what's the big deal? So it's important, and this guy doesn't really note it, but it's important to note that modernism has two parts to it. Good part and a bad part, if I can be simplistic. Modernism tended to focus on reason and rationality. It was very, very high. However, they carried it way to the point of only reason and rationality, only science provides answers. Thus, they tended to be anti-supernatural. So you can just imagine where that puts miracles in the church. They're out. Now, we're talking like 1800s, early 1900s that this started to take in. But the good point is that modernism brings a certainty of thinking, that you can figure things out in modernism. They don't tend, like I said, to go too much and focus on what's called the scientific method. Maybe you heard this. This is shown in our modern society when people say science gives us the answers. What they really mean is the scientific method gives us answers. But they call it science because to them, and this includes even scientists, they think that that encapsulates all of science, the scientific method. What is the scientific method? The scientific method is where you take something and you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it, and when you keep getting consistent results, there's the answers. So they see this as the way to get truth. Stephen Hawking, brilliant man, said in The Grand Design that science replaces philosophy. Science now tells us the answer on things. Just like I said in another class, there's one little problem. He made a philosophical statement to exclude philosophy. So he made a blunder. And often scientists will make mistakes like this because they're not trained in thinking. They're trained in the scientific method. But they think that's all they need. And they don't realize there's ways to think that can tell you if you're thinking correctly. So that's basically what modernism is. I say is because it's still around. Even though postmodernism tried to get rid of it, it's still around in one thing. The important thing, see if I missed anything. One thing in Tim Baker's description of modernism, he was saying, that science can teach us everything. That's the view of modernism. But then he says modernists think the supernatural is unknowable. Either the supernatural doesn't exist, or you can't know it. Why? Because of the scientific method. You can't do an experiment and figure out if there's something metaphysical like God. It just doesn't work. So that's one thing. They said that the modernists will say anything from the Bible that contradicts modernistic thinking, and there being scientific thinking, should be taken symbolically, not literally. And this is an important point. I think he wasn't clear on this. Let me explain it in my experience in the evangelical church, it's either symbolic or it's literal. There is no way there's any of the two of them. Usually, some groups in the evangelical church believe that everything in the Bible must be absolutely literal, or you're going to make the whole Bible symbolic, allegorical, and thus you're, taking away. And I believe it was Origen, that tended to go too far with allegory. I don't know if he thought this, but one example is the book, The Song of Solomon, was seen as so, I want to say, it was so erotic. It was about marriage. It was about physical intimacy and marriage. That's what the book of Song of Solomon. Well, it was seen by some in the church as being so frothy. Oh, this can't be from God. Oh, no, he made us originated physical intimacy, but this can't be from God. So we are going to allegorize it that it's the love of Christ. Whoa. If you read the Song of Solomon and then try and make that peg fit through the hole, it's not going to work. However, the Bible does contain a lot of symbology, even allegory. So it's not one or the other. The Bible has literal things in it. Oh, for sure. Narrative, the birth of Jesus, Moses, Abraham moving from one place to another, the Exodus. These are literal things. These are not things made up by the Jews in exile in Babylon because they were discouraged, so they made up the whole Moses story. No. If you read these accounts in the Bible, they read like history, not fiction. And that's why Ken Ham, in his book Already Gone, said we do a disservice when we speak about Bible stories. Because, while that's linguistically correct, in our culture, that means, it's a nice tale, a made-up tale. Oh, the art with the little giraffe sticking their head above the giraffe. Oh, they're so cute. It's a little made-up story. No! All right, so the Bible contains literal things, but it also contains symbolic language in it. When it talks about the seed of a woman, it's not saying there's like plant seeds in a woman. It's talking about egg and the reproductive process. Also things like the trees will clap their hands or the rocks will cry out. This is allegory or symbology. We're not actually believing that trees have physical little hands and a conscious mind to decide when to clap, that rocks have vocal cords. No, Jesus was using language, like he said, plucking out the eye. I don't really believe Jesus expects us to mutilate our body. No, he's making exaggerated point. No, now you won't believe anything in the Bible. That's usually the response I get. You're going to symbolize it all the way. No. Jesus was talking figuratively to make a point. Have you ever done that with anybody in your life, like your children? You will be grounded for eternity, young lady. I've used that language. Did I really mean eternity?
Think about it. Wishful thinking.
No, one guy pointed out to me, because, I adopted, so I was getting a lot of advice from people who were already parents, because I knew nothing about parenting, and I had adopted a 9 and 10-year-old, so I went from a nice, stable, calm life to instant chaos. And they were saying, this thing about grounding children, be careful, because when you ground them, you're grounded. But sometimes I didn't know what else to do. I got so frustrated. You are grounded for 3,000 weeks, Anyway, so we do talk in exaggerated, figuristic language, sometimes like the DMV was packed. DMV really wasn't wall-to-wall people. But my point is, the moderists will say, oh, the Bible is symbolic. It's not really true. We're saying no, that Jesus used, technically it's called genre, poetry, different ways of talking to people. Jesus spoke in parables and stories to teach because people learn like that. If I stood up here and wah, 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 if I never moved, like in the Air Force, a lot of guys, when they gave their briefings, they would stand in one spot, point to the slide, and then read every point on the slide. So you could read it and hear it, right? I taught like that in this monotone and only did factual, you'd be fast asleep real quick. So people also learn when you tell stories, accounts, experiences, to help it become real, pointing out their failures. I always like when pastors point out their failures, because then I feel like, wow, this guy is like me. I had pastors, you weren't even allowed to talk to them. You had to talk to them through their assistant and make an appointment maybe. Like, who is this person? No. So, I think I beat that point to death. I think I love to do. But modernism. What's the attraction of modernism to modernists? It means everything has a logical explanation. In their idea what logic is, everything is rational. You don't need to appeal to this guy in the sky to explain things. Stephen Hawking accused us of being like people who didn't understand thunder, and so they made a thunder god, and you modern religious people are the exact same thing. Wow. We call that reductionistic. Yeah, that's me. I don't understand natural phenomena, so I make up God. I'm sorry. I get a little fired up some days at being accused of things. But who was the figurehead in modernism? Immanuel Kant and David Hume. And we'll talk about them later. These guys were monumental in their effect upon modern world. Some believe that history really is just the same old thing over and over again, it's just man being the same exact way. And no, I don't agree. In history, we see epochs. We see things that greatly change. For example, I was watching a show on the steam engine. When the steam engine came, life changed dramatically. The printing press. Oh my, we're talking of Christianity. A massive change in the way Christian church worked and fought. Funny, sadly humorous that this was actually seen by some in the church as evil. You can't have the common person reading the Bible for themselves. They won't understand it and they'll get it wrong. So we will outlaw them having a Bible in their own language. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Even to the point we will kill you if you put the Bible in their own language. Versus, I didn't even know this. I watched the show. I watched a couple times before. I didn't know that General MacArthur, who you wouldn't strike as a religious person, when he became the administrator of Japan after the war, he set up freedoms, he set up elections, and one thing he did, General MacArthur did, was distribute tons of free Bibles to the Japanese culture because he wanted to see religious tolerance go into a country that was basically almost Shinto or Buddhistic. The General MacArthur distributing Bibles? Oh, church and state! But he did this. So the printing press, what was another? The Enlightenment, the Renaissance, the coming of postmodernism, and now social justice, monumentally changing our culture. So how do we connect to a modernist? That's the question. How would you speak to a modernist? Somebody who's big on science, big on facts. I don't even know if there's much people like that anymore, but I run into some of my co-pilots. Like, how would you connect to them? How do you think you would connect to somebody like that?
What was the question?
Yeah. A modernist, somebody who's big on facts and logic, especially science. How would you connect with them to reach them for Christ? Or tell me how you would not connect with them. What do you think?
I will tell them that I believe in science too, that Jesus created science.
Yes!
God created science.
Yes! Yes, when I have discussions with evolutionists, I often try and cite things about information theory, genetic decay, and a lot of times they're like, you can't use stuff like that. No, you're religious. You can only talk about faith. You're not allowed to use facts and science. No, it's like, bzz, bzz. You know, I bet you love on sci-fi shows how computers blow up when they have the wrong program. Like, now my computer has burned up, but I still have like Star Trek, so like everything blew up. You know, like James Bond. Everything in James Bond movies is a horrendous big explosion. You know. Anyways, rabbit trail. But yeah, that was a great answer.
But I always use the example of the Earth and the Sun and the distances and how life would sustain itself if it wasn't exactly where it was, and the moon and all that. And I say, you know, because what's the chances of that happening? Of the Earth and Sun being exactly where they need to be to sustain life.
Yay, Jeff, you get a gold medal. Now, tell me what that's called.
What's it called?
Yeah, it's called. You lose your gold medal if you can't. But look at this, cheating by his son. Look at it. I love this.
Intelligent design.
That was very close, but not. Really close. Anthropic principle, fine-tuning. When we look at the universe and human life, it is so, the parameters are so, tiny that the probability that it happened all by itself with no designer, no causation, no overriding intelligence is just way up there. And there comes a point, because sometimes I hear, but it's possible. It's 1 in 10 to the 30,000 zeros, but that means there's a chance it happened randomly. You don't understand mathematics. I don't understand mathematics. But when something is so incredibly improbable, it is considered impossible. But I'm not going to go there because that's all I remember what Keith taught me on that. But yes, resonate by talking about science and reasoning. Don't be like, oh, I feel so good in Christianity. It makes me happy all the time. God takes away every single problem, and I never get unhappy. First of all, really? I don't know what church you're going to, but tell me where this church is, because that's not my experience. And secondly, I think that's not biblical. Jesus never promised us a rose garden. Who sung that? Look, if you don't know who sung it, you have to sing the whole thing for us. And neither do I. It was some country western guy. Moving on, before I have to sing. Huh?
Nothing. Who sang it? Oh, I don't know. I didn't want him to sing it.
She didn't want me to sing. That's my wife. Welcome back, honey. Postmodernism. Okay, so as you can, in your great English skills, you can figure out postmodernism must not be like modernism. Oh, you're brilliant. Let's move on. Somewhere in the 1900s, some believe around 1960, people got fed up, he says, with modernistic thinking, where everything tended to be cold, hard science. And we can see this. They did studies. I forget his name. I had a bachelor's in business management. There was a guy who was all about efficiency in the workplace. Very, very analytical. So he was going to figure out what was the optimum lighting and position of the worker to get the most productivity. So he took these female workers who were assemblies, and he did this lighting and all, and very efficient. He said, this is it! The light's at this level. No, we have to be scientific, so now we're going to have turn the lights down and all, and this will show how she's more efficient. Something happened. When he turned the lights down, she was just as efficient. She got better. Oh, then it's turning the lights down. No, what they didn't realize was the fact they were using this person in the study made her feel like she was making a contribution, and so she worked better. Imagine that. You make a worker feel like they're contributing to the mission of the organization, and they will actually produce better. I'm not saying absolutely every case, but this is one aspect that gets out of the cold, hard science that postmodernism, in a way, was seeking to the touchy-feely aspect of humanity. So this was the motivation, but the problem, if you notice the pattern, is that humanity tends to say something good and it goes too far with it, runs with it to the extreme in one way or another, and it loses its original value. I know as parents and spouses, we never do that. Never, ever. So, postmodernism, what does postmodernism believe? If you haven't heard about postmodernism and you've been in the evangelical church, you've been sleeping, because everything is about pounding on postmodernism these days. Well, reason for that, and in some ways they're correct. Postmodernism takes ideas and foster ideas about ideas. Again, we come back to ideas. But postmodernism basically is saying, you can't tell me what to think. You Christians, with your idea that there's a truth that's true in all cultures and all places, universal objective truth, that's definitely not true. And in fact, it's absolutely objectively not true that there is absolute objective truth. I asked somebody about that once, and they're like, what? I said, yeah, it's called tiger eats its tail in philosophy. Self-refuting, you know. Like I gave that one story once, the guy said, everything is a shade of gray. I said, everything is a shade of gray? Everything is a shade of gray. I said, absolutely everything? Absolutely everything. I said, you know, you just refuted yourself. And I got the great philosophical response I usually get. No, I didn't! You know, oh, okay, I lost. I'm sorry. You yelled at me, so that means you're right. But this is what postmodernism basically was saying. Now, postmodernism tends to manifest itself in something called multiculturalism. Now, doesn't that sound good in a way? Oh, multiculturalism. Is Christianity about multiple cultures? Is Christianity about diversity? He said that evil D word in church. Is it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes. Aren't we to go to the whole world? Are we supposed to go to foreign lands and turn them into little Americans?
No.
No, yes.
No.
Wouldn't we like to bring them freedom? Yes.
That doesn't mean it's American. It's not an American
Very
thought.
good.
It was a Christian thought from the very beginning.
Yes.
It's an
Very
American
good.
adopted God.
You get a silver medal, Jackie. You don't get the gold medal. I already give it to Jeff. So unless you can take it from him, you know. Yes. So we are. We would love to see church have. I'm just going to say it. More than just white people. We would love to have Asian people, black people, Native Americans. We would love that.
Christianity isn't about color.
What Bible verse do you have to prove that?
I think there ever was one.
Because you Christians went over and you supported oppressive governments on
Who
the
says
people.
Christianity was white? Ever.
Didn't you read that meme that's been posted a while ago? They had the white Jesus and the real Jesus. And they showed how the white Jesus was a manifestation, a manipulation of the real Jesus, you know, to foster white power structures.
I don't believe they ever discussed color of skin.
I'm thinking of the verse that says there is no Jew, no Greek, no male, no female. It's talking about the equality of man in the sense of salvation, yes, if we want to bring in the context. But I think we can see, because Jesus wasn't white. He was Middle Eastern. He was considered Eastern, right? So we are for multiple cultures, but we're not for multiculturalism. See, when you add ISM to something, it usually goes wackadoodle. So what is multiculturalism? Basically the idea that you can't say, well, over here, this is wrong, and you are not allowed to walk over to this culture and say, that's wrong too. No, no, no. What you think is right and wrong over here isn't right and wrong over here. They have their own right and wrongs.
If we're made in God's image and nobody's ever seen God, how would one know? Therefore, the part of God in us is unseen. This is just
Agree
us.
and
This is just a
disagree
vessel.
with you.
Am I correct? This is our vessel. So
Right.
the part of God in us is the unseen part of us, the Spirit. How could, if God is unseen and has never been seen and cannot be seen, and could not, I mean, Moses couldn't see that.
Okay. When the Bible, the New Testament says no one has seen God at any time, what does that mean? Wouldn't literalists say, that means no one has seen God at any time. Period. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. End of conversation. Is that what it means? Have we ever seen part of the Godhead? Have we seen anything divine at any time? Christ. So, yes, we have seen.
We've seen Christ, we've seen Christ, but the part of God is in a vessel. I mean, I don't know, maybe I misunderstand.
He's totally God.
I see us as our,
He
I mean,
not
he is
part
also
of-
flesh.
He's not part of God, Jackie. He's totally God.
He's totally
That's an
God, but he's
important
also
aspect.
human, right?
Right?
Jesus said, if you've seen me,
Right.
You've seen.
You've seen God.
Right. Notice I said part of the Godhead.
Okay.
Right. What I mean by that is when we use the word God, we often mean God the Father, which in the New Testament is many times depicted as Theos. But what God, the word G-O-D really means is God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So you notice I always use the word divine to try and not make that mistake.
Okay.
It's a technical point, yes, I know, but being that I believe in the Trinity, I have to clarify. So, this really comes down to a question of what can be known about God. And we can know a tremendous amount about God. The Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. We can know a tremendous amount. Even though we've never seen God the Father. But we've seen Jesus. And like Lee pointed out, they are not identical. Because if God the Father and God the Son were identical, they would be the same person. But they are so similar. And this goes back to, I think it's Latin, homoousios versus homoousios, and all this technical stuff. And they can correct me when I butchered it. But it's talking about the same substance. So when he says, you've seen me, you've seen the Father, because they're not like radically different. Oh, God the Father, he's this mean, vengeful. I am going to wipe out humanity. I am so torqued off at them. And like Jesus is like going, oh no, God, don't kill him, please, be merciful. No, this is a bad way to think. Risking being controversial, this tends to be the way a certain denomination depicts Jesus. Jesus is really ticked off. Oh, he's so ticked off, he's gonna just zap us dead. But his mother is there pleading for us. This is why you pray to his mother in order to hold back the wrath of Jesus.
That's the Catholics.
I didn't say that. I try to be respectful. I'm not just slamming them, but there's certain key things that I disagree. But anyways, back to multiculturalism. Where are we? What did I do? Oh, okay. Postmodernism basically says each little culture is in its own bubble, and you can never go from one bubble to another. Oh no, that's your Christians forcing your religion on people, But I was reading Bruce Thornton, and I don't know if he's a religious guy or not, but he was speaking on what's called two intellectual currents that increasingly dominate American scholarly efforts. In the first case, namely multiculturalism, despite all the talk of cultural diversity, there is actually a heart of anti-humanist, anti-liberal identity politics. Now I said the D word earlier, and that gets me kicked out of the church. Now I said the L word, and that will get me kicked out of evangelical church. But I have to clarify what he means by liberal. Liberal is actually a good thing. Oh, he has to go. Get him out of here before he says another heretical thing. No, liberal. In fact, my university, I'm doing my PhD, it's Faulkner University, advocates a liberal education. What is happening to Christian families is, the thought is, I want my kid to be successful. Oh, I want them, I don't want them to be, greedy, but I want them to be successful. So I'm going to send them to a school that focuses on the job they're going to do. All this extra stuff, philosophy and all this other English, that doesn't need, that's a waste of time. Just teach them how to do their job well. Well, the problem is, without a liberal education of all these other subjects, you don't know how to think. And you can't understand humanity. So that's why I believe that there is actually literature that's good to read that is not just religious. You get thrown out again. I don't believe in Bible-only teaching of children. I knew a couple, all she taught her child was the Bible. Oh, that's great. No math, no science. The child was going to graduate homeschool, high school, could not do math. Because she thought the right way to do it was only teach them Bible verses. But that's what we mean by liberal, is not political, but wide-ranging. But anyways, continuing, he says, individual identity, talking about multiculturalism, is situated in ethnic particularity, and there is a scorn of the liberal notion of universal human nature. Universal human nature. What is he referring to? And he may not even known he was referring to. What is the universal human nature?
Sin nature.
The sin nature. The nature of man. Yes, that in multiculturalism is denied because it would go from culture to culture to culture, and we can't have that. Out of this multicultural assumption comes the false belief that all cultures are equal and thus must not be compared in a moral standards way, since there is no consistent good and evil between cultures. All cultures are equal. What does he say? What does he say? Not everyone's not equal. Get him out of here. Not only will we throw him out of the church, we're going to throw him out of this town because he's violating, this equality thing. No, what he's meaning is cultures can be rated by certain criteria as a culture being of more benefit or value than other cultures. What? Yes! But see, this requires that be a consistent good and evil through all cultures. Is there a consistent evil definition that can run through all cultures? No! Yes! C.S. Lewis talks about this. In the 1940s, Mere Christianity, he was talking about this back then. Because America, the golden age of Christianity was the 1950s. Everything was perfect back then. We could just get back to the 50s. He said that doesn't matter what culture, and if you butt in line, it's wrong. Hey! Some things are consistent. Now, we're not talking about procedures or preferences. In one country, driving on the right is the correct way to do it. In another country, these crazy people drive on the wrong side of the road, the left side. That's not right and wrong. That's correct and incorrect. But Thornton ends, and I'm going to end in this point, I got 2 minutes, is Thornton cites what's called a therapeutic melodrama. Now notice, I just said in postmodernism, multiculturalism, you can't have right and wrong in one culture apply in another culture. That's what multiculturalism says. No. This therapeutic melodrama where sexism, racism, colonialism, imperialism, to name a few, are inflicted upon innocent non-Westerners who may only be viewed as hapless victims. That sounds just like today. Yes, it is. Here's the problem. You just said that all cultures of right and wrong can't apply equally across cultures, but now you're saying at the same time, you sexist, imperialist Westerners, you have afflicted all these other cultures you've gone to and oppressed them. And that is true all the time, everywhere. Didn't you just say you can't? But now you're saying you can. This is the problem with multicultural thinking, with postmodernism. It will eat itself. Just the problem is, and I'll end with this, they don't think so. This is where our culture is today. It's all about social justice. And I think if you read the book, How Christianity Changed the World, you'll see that Christians were for social justice way long before anyone else was. Really. But in this culture, social justice says that all these things are violations of who we are in all places. You are an oppressor of others. So that was postmodernism. And in the other class I went into why postmodernism is no longer reigning. It is diminishing in our culture, and it is being replaced by an exclusive, oppressive tyranny of ideas. Oh, he's talking about Christianity. See, he finally came around. No, I'm not talking about Christianity. When Christianity is done right, it leads to the most human freedom and human flourishing. When you have secularism, it leads to oppression, tyranny, and the exclusion of any idea other than what it allows. And we're going to pick up with secular humanism next time. Thank you, Lord. Whew. Lord, I'm going to be honest and tell you that I know I'm supposed to be grateful, but times I see the way the culture is going and I find it hard to be grateful.